Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give it a minute or two before we get started, but while we're waiting, quick show of hands. Can you hear me just fine? I see a few hands raised. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great to see some familiar faces joining us today. Without further ado, we'll get kicked off. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's doing well. My name's Darshini Shah, and I'm joined today by Nick Trevor, who is our solutions consultant. Welcome to today's session, first of two on customization. So today's session is going to be all about things you can do within SYSPRO without having technical coding skills. So by all rights, I should be running this, but I've got Nick here who's going to help me showcase everything in SYSPRO.
So today's
it's always fun, isn't it? All right, wonderful, Nick. So without further ado, what are we going to cover today? If we can move on to the agenda for today. All right, great. Well, we've got three things that we want to try and cover. The first thing is in and around the simplification of the user interface. Now, I suspect a number of you over the years have gone through and spent quite a bit of time around tidying up what SYSPRO looks like specifically for your business needs, especially if you've come on the system administration course. We don't want to rework the entire course, but really it's about identifying some quick wins that you can have in and around improving that navigation, not just for yourself, but also for the users. There's some tips, a few pro tips, as we call them, around improving productivity and some efficiencies you can gain. And then finally, there is inevitably the hunt for data. I want to see more of my data. Where can I go to see more? So we're going to cover those three big areas. And you know what Nick and I look like now, so we're going to switch off the webcams just to save a little bit of that bandwidth, if that's okay. Let's go ahead and move on. So the first thing we're going to do is improved user experience. So it's interesting, I keep reading in the news around the fact that there is this great resignation, and I dream about the day that I can wake up and resign and wake up in the Bahamas, but we know that's not true. What we are seeing, however, is the fact that there has been quite a bit of movement, and as we talk to customers, there are oftentimes new employees that we're talking to as we're engaging with them as well. And I suspect if you look around the organization, you've got a little bit of that yourself as well. So as you've got new resources, one of the things you want to think about is what's the quickest way to onboard them? How do you train them quicker? How do you make SYSPRO intuitive and easy to use around the navigation? So those are a few quick hit items that we wanted to cover off as we talk about some of the things you can do in the user experience itself. Quick navigation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nick, who's going to jump right into SYSPRO and show us some of the things we can do with it. Over to you, Nick.
Hello, everyone. Right, so what I've done, I've set up a few scenarios that we can walk through around the user experience and how you can design processes to assist in it. So the first process that I want to focus on today is around the accounts payable invoice processing. Now, a lot of you will be having issues with suppliers lately due to the current environment, and there might be needs to manage the invoice posting a bit more carefully. With a lot of things in SYSPRO, they'll have its own internal status, but what we want to be able to put in is our own status that means something a bit more to us. So I want to introduce you to the concept which you'll know already well is custom form fields, and build on top of that. So I'm going to start putting an invoice on for a supplier 1 on my system. So I'll give it a number, I'll give it a value to start it off, and then you'll notice down here I have the option to put it on hold. With that on hold, there's not necessarily any information about why the invoice has gone onto hold, and I want to be able to report on that a bit more further and also enforce the user to select it. So with the capabilities of SYSPRO, I can add in a custom form field. So in field selector, I can hit that, I can hit new. And then from here, I'm given the option to start generating a custom form field against this transaction. So one of the things that SYSPRO has been doing lately is adding more custom form fields to transaction tables like this. In the past, they were quite built into static data like stock codes, but you might be able to see that you're able to add more information in like here. So I'm going to give this a new name. I'm going to call it our internal status. I'm going to get a 50 character length, and what I want it to be is mandatory. So I'm going to save that first to make sure it gets the values and then edit. From there, I can now add in browsable fields. So this is what the users would be able to select from. So I can obviously do a payment dispute or a date dispute as an idea of status and why we're putting it on hold. And I also need a status where there isn't going to be put on hold that the user will have to select because I've made this field mandatory. So for now, I'm going to go with 2 fields. You can obviously extend this list as far as you need it to be and close out of here. I can then drag on my field, I can put it where I need it, and I can then move it below my internal status and my hold invoice. Okay, so I'm going to leave that blank for now to show you how that works. And I'm going to post my invoice. So let me just find a GRN to put this against. So at the minute, it's not filled in. I'm posting my invoice and I'll hit that and I'll start to get now an error. So I'm not able to process my invoice until I fill the internal status. In this case, I'm going to select payment dispute and hit post. So now that's gone through, I can now report on the information. So how can I get access to that? So what I've done, I've developed a tile inside SYSPRO called Suppliers with Balance. And I'm going to walk you through how we can create this tile later on. So I'm going to click into that, and that shows me all my suppliers with their opening balances or their current balances on their account. The natural way now would be to go into supplier query and see my invoices and perhaps even query the invoices from here where I can also clear and hold them. But what would be nice is to be able to skip the supplier query step and drill straight into this program. So there's a little trick that I try and do. With any program in SYSPRO, or a lot of programs in SYSPRO, you can actually run by passing it parameters. You have to trial this. It's a bit of a trial and error. Not all programs are built to do it, but I know particularly this one is. So I'm going to press Shift and F7, and that gives me a 6-character program code called IMP by BIS. So I'm going to commit that to my memory, come out of here and go back into my supplier tile. I'm going to use my hyperlink here, and because I have the admin rights to do this, I can go into a program called Customize Smart Links. From here, I can click New. It's going to match on the supplier caption. So any list view in SYSPRO that has supplier presented, it will give me this option that I'm about to build in. I'm going to call it invoice. I'm going to type in imp BIS, and I'm going to pass it %key. As you can read down here, this is just explaining that it's passing whatever it is that I've selected to this program. Save and exit. Save and exit again. Now I've got this available to me. Invoice is now an option on my list. That wasn't before. If I click onto that, I'm now able to drill into that program without having to go through supplier query. Okay, so there's one thing missing from this screen now, and that is my custom form field. So I can right click up here, and I've got the option to customize and add what we call custom columns. So this is used quite extensively. You can actually add columns from other tables, but in this particular one, I want to focus on my custom form column, that being my AP invoice and my internal status column here. I'm going to add that to the grid. I'm going to move it into position next to my on hold flag. And once I go out and back in again, I should see that's now populated. So from here, I've managed to basically customize the workflow, add more meaning to the on hold flags in SYSPRO. And from here, I can obviously take it off hold and clear the invoice ready for payment.
Lovely,
So,
Nick. That's really good to see, and especially because you've got single step, that makes it really easy to have the business rule adhered to, which is the fact that you want to track why you're keeping payments on hold. but also about getting to that information really nicely and quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And all of that design can be done by the role. At the minute, I'm outside the role, I'm just doing it by my operator. But typically you do that inside your role from the business so they can see that information. So the next thing I want to move on to is around the standard list views in SYSPRO. A lot of people will be already introduced to the concept of application builders and custom list views. I just want to remind people again how you can get access to that information and where to start. So I've got a program called Application Builder in the administration here. Now I've selected one called Orders. This is a blank application, so basically nothing lives inside here. It has its own program name, so you can give role and group access to it. So not everyone has to go into it, but it allows me to develop my own applications. So this is a very entry level one. We've done complex ones in the past, and this is looking at a standard list view that SYSPRO offers out of the box. So by clicking the add button, I can go into here and I can select object type. I'm going to select my list view, and you'll notice down here there's templates, and this is what I'm going to drill on from today. So there's several list view templates in here. The one I want to look at is the orders and bookings report. Now, the user story behind this is, perhaps you're onboarding a new warehouse manager and they don't want to necessarily run a crystal report, because this is exactly the same as the orders and bookings SRS report that you can run into a PDF. But apart from this sits outside of Crystal and allows us to put it into a list view and refresh it dynamically, so that the new users will be able to get this information a lot quicker without having to rerun the report and print it necessarily. So I'm going to hit select, and this will take a little second to load as it runs the business object, and it will then populate the grid. So this is what I am now looking at. So once I'm happy with that, I can save and exit. The same grid will then populate into the application builder. So if I go out and come back in, you'll see I now have, rather than an empty canvas, I have my grid. So behind this, I can use field chooser and I can add on additional information that the user might want to see. So in this case, I want to see the ship date for the order. Now, what's important to my warehouse manager is what he needs to ship today, and not necessarily if it's always clear. So what I can now use is something called conditional formatting against the list. So conditional formatting advanced. I can set up a rule and I can say which column I want it to apply to. So if I select my ship date, I want it to be, if it's equal to, and if you notice at the bottom when I click on value 1, I'm giving it a bit of a hint of what I can use, and I'm going to do date now. So that is today's date. And what I want to happen is for the cell background to become orange. I hit apply now, you can see the rule is applied to the grid, and I can apply and exit. So now my user has all the visibility they need to see what they need to ship today using simple conditional formatting. So there's further rules you can do in there. You can experiment. You can get it to even hide rows, you get it to highlight across. And this is kind of, again, entry-level conditional formatting that your user can use themselves to drill into. So once I've now got my report, there's other options I can do. I can customize and I can show the list view toolbar. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to close out of here and I'm going to show you a slightly different option in here that was introduced in SYSPRO 8, which allows me to show list views toolbar as always. So once I come back into here, you should see I now have my list view toolbar available, which now allows me, so one, I've managed to replace a crystal report with a dynamic report, which I can hit refresh on. And two, I've made this conditional formatted for easy visibility. And now I can even search into there if I wanted to filter out the rows. So really quick and handy for someone who's new to the business who wouldn't necessarily want to be running a PDF report for their orders and bookings.
The other thing I really like about this, Nick, is the fact that you've now got an easily Excel formatted way of viewing the same report. And so because you've added in that custom toolbar, I see that lovely little Excel icon that allows me to just have all of the data spit out into a nice Excel template as well. So it's quick and easy to do.
Yeah, exactly that. I can click that and any of my filtered rows will then spit out into Excel. And obviously anyone who's used a computer will probably have used Excel before. I can then start analysing this data.
Definitely. And the nice thing about this, as you showed earlier on, is the fact that there are a number of standard templates of list views pre-built into there. If they're not, that's something that can be created as a customization on top of that as well. But it just gives you a nice container to be able to do some additional work into. So you've got easy access to that. And you've got at-hand information for someone new that's come in. They click on the button, load it up, and away they go.
Exactly that. And like Darcy says, we develop these application builders for customers. And so if the particular one is in there, you can speak to us, develop it. But also on our next session, in the light coding session, I will go through writing a very basic application builder from scratch. Right. So now just to chain on from this, you'll notice here I've got the option line stock code. Now, this gives me no hyperlinks, as you noticed before, because the column hasn't been named stock code. So what I'm going to do is to allow my warehouse manager to drill into inventory query nice and easy. I'm going to add another smart link. So again, I am enhancing the usability. So rather than matching on that, I'm going to match on line stock code. I call it inventory query. And I'm going to do InvPen, which I happen to know is the inventory program, but obviously you can browse and you can search on the programs to find them. And again, I'm just going to type in %key, which is my stock code. So now I've done that, I've got the option now to go into inventory query from my grid. So again, I've not had to come out of here. I can go straight into there. And now what happens if I want, or the user wants the ability to easily now transact against this stock code? Now, if you notice in here, there's no option for adjustments. Now, I could add adjustments or receipts or anything like that. I could easily add the program in the same way I've done before, but a slightly alternative way and a bit more in your face is the ability to add toolbar buttons. So up here, I can hit customize, drag this just down out the way a bit, and then from here, if I right click any of these buttons, I can do add a new button. So I'm going to do inventory movements. Hit enter, that becomes a new button. I can now do a program. Again, I happen to know this is Imp010, but for anyone else, that you'd have to go into the program, do Shift F7 to find it, and hit enter. Okay, so I can see now if I right click that, that's the program it will launch when I click it. So finally, if I click Imp010, so it'll now build up into my inventory receipts, and I now can start transacting how I want. So I've managed to drill from my orders and bookings report into inventory query and then transact against it, and without having to go out and go back to the main menu. So we've streamlined the user experience and the number of clicks they've had to do.
Fantastic, Nick. That's great. And hopefully just a couple of really nice quick tips to be able to go in and think differently about how you're customizing your user interface just to make it easier for yourself and the users as you're navigating through.
Exactly that. Okay, so now I want to go on to our next section.
All right. We're getting tired of hearing about inflation because it's in the news every single morning. The parts that I think are really important for us as a business is really around the fact that we know costs are going up, but we want to be able to have a slightly stronger pulse on what's happening than we would historically, especially when it comes around cost management and price management. And that's where this next section comes in. It's very much around threshold management because we want to be able to see right away when there is a change, when we're going beyond the costs of something where that increase has happened and we've not pre-baked that in, so that we're able to go ahead and manage that a little bit more effectively. And it's about automatic notification. Now, inflation is just one example, but of course you can think of many, many, many areas in your business itself directly where wouldn't it be really nice to know when someone in the business had an impact on SYSPRO that had an effect on something that's going to be affecting either your costs or your margins. And so that's really what Nick's going to show us. There are a couple of tools that are available within SYSPRO, and he'll go through a couple of ways that you can tackle this specific issue.
Thank you, Ashley. So what I want to focus on in this section is around events that can happen in SYSPRO. So when a certain thing happens, like a receipt's been made, we can fire off certain events, whether that be an email, a task, an inbox message, anything like that. We can start looking at generating. And the first place I want to go to is something called event management, which was added in the early days of SYSPRO and not necessarily commonly used, but has its uses. So I'm going to click into my events. I've already got a few set up around the requisition approval flow, or if stock goes below the minimum. The one I want to focus on today is when a works order goes over the expected cost. So what does that mean? That means if I've issued too much material to it, or the labor rate's been wrong, or I've issued too much labor to it, it's taken too long to manufacture, I won't be able to notify the mailbox when that event occurs in SYSPRO. So I'm going to go into add at the top, and I'm going to give it a name called job costs, and I'm going to select my event. So these are all the pre-baked events available in SYSPRO. You can see the different types of events and where they sit. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and do job costs exceed expected. If I double click that, it now populates into here. What I want it to trigger is an email. So as I said before, there's other options. I can get it to run a custom program, an application. I can just write it to a log file. In this case, I want it to email an inbox. I'm going to say job greater than costs. Okay. I'm going to leave some of these ticked. It's set as active, and then I'm going to do a inbox. So I'm going to configure my email. So my to address will need to be what I have pre-populated over here. So this is my fake inbox that I created. Subject is pulled through from the description, and then I've got some body text here. And I can even use the key inside subject. So I'll explain this a bit more in a second.
Just as Nick's building up the email, one of the things to be mindful of is with the events, when you've got a different event that gets created, there are some events that will be triggered when something happens in SYSPRO itself. So there's someone in the job entry program itself, the WIP issues, the labor posting, that will go ahead and do that. Now I know a number of you will have automated tasks as well. And what happens is with automated tasks is you may be firing off a business object that's happening in the background. And if that's the case, there's a different event that would exist that's for e.net versus SYSPRO triggered events. So just be mindful of that if you're using events, which one is going to kick off based on where the transaction is actually taking place.
Exactly. And just to fill in the blanks, I copied and pasted these values in, but just so you know where you can get them, there's a keywords button up here, which will then tell you which each of these parameters refer to for that event. Okay, so once I've done the event, now I need to prove to you that it works. So all I'm going to do is copy a job and overissue material to it so it goes over the expected value. So in work in progress, I'm first going to right click here and include the category browsers, which then allows me to go work in progress. Browsers options are available and I can browse on jobs. I can then scroll down to, well, go to the end of the file. And this is the particular one I've been testing on. I can hit the copy button and then I can simply tab off and hit copy. Actually, if I can come back, I'm just going to make sure it's confirmed first before I hit that. And then continue. That's giving me a new job 604. So an easy way to copy jobs. So we're now going to go into job postings, and what I need to do is issue all the material, labor, and then an extra amount. So I'm typing 604. I'm going to do both labor and materials. And again, this is just a common process, and now I'm going to have to just go through my issuing of bins nice and quickly. So RM. A few of these to go through. So that's now issued my material. I can now go to specific issues, and I'm going to over issue a B711, which is one of the parts it's used. So let's put a 10 on that and hit post. And I'll have to issue it from a bin, and I can say if it's complete or not. So in theory now, that should have sent an email or triggered the event. So the first place I'm going to go to check that that's happened is my event logs. So I've put this on my favorites, but it's available in the admin section on the program list. You can see there at 14:55, it sent an email. So I can see that event has triggered. And if I go to my fake inbox, hopefully if I hit refresh, it's got through. There's my email. And you can see it's filled in the keys with the different values. And it's also used Outlook in the background on my computer to send the email, so I know where it's come from.
Nick, you spying on me? You keeping track of all the issues I've made to the jobs?
All the time. You always make issues, Darshni.
I do. I'm an issue girl.
So that's a nice easy flow to keep a track of jobs and the potential issues that can occur. But obviously be mindful, like Darshni said, of where those transactions are occurring. If they're occurring in data switch, then you might have to consider a different approach to using event management. Okay, so obviously those events are slightly limited in terms of how many options you've got available, but in the later versions of SYSPRO, they introduced electronic signatures, which you'll be familiar with. So this, just for reference, if you've been in this before, this form has changed in the very latest. So this will look a little different to your setup, I can imagine. But what I'm going to do now is maintain my Pt1 e-signatures. So the process I want to focus on today is when I book in goods and whether those goods from the supplier are exceeding the current cost of my inventory item. We know where all prices are going up, and I need to be able to make sure my inventory is correctly valued. In order to do that, I need to be notified when certain events occur in that manner. So I'm going to go down to purchase orders, and I'm going to look at the PO receipt. So I hit edit, and what I'm going to do is create a user-defined condition. So this means when it gets receipted, based on this condition here, will it fire a certain event? So I've got a lot more scope for when these events fire. And I can add multiple conditions as well. So what I'm going to do is browse on the available fields, and I'm going to say if my price is greater than, and I want to look for cost, inventory cost. Okay, accept and close that condition. So now that's happened, I've got a few things I can do here. I can actually, if I wanted to, hit denied, which means I'd never be able to book in a PO if the purchase price was greater than the cost. I can also set it to log only, which is what I'm going to do here. And I can set an effective period, and then I can also now set up the trigger. So log only allows me to set up the trigger that I'm looking for. So I'm going to hit detail log required, which will allow me to post details, and that will show me a number of variables that are available to me. So all these, anything that's here with a percent sign is available in my email. So I'm press OK to that. I hit transaction successful and set up my trigger. So I'm going to delete that one from before. I'm going to add a new one, and I select trigger type. So again, like the event manager, I can run various things. Quite commonly, we use VB scripts to do certain things, but focus on the no-code approach. We'll go in for an email in this particular example, and I want to edit the contents of the email. So again, I'm looking at a very similar setup to before. So I'm going to put my email in there, and I'm going to just put in my e-signature body. So like I mentioned before, the percent sign and the key is what's available in that logging, and makes it available here. So I can save that now and come out here. click save against my condition, and I can see now that's set to log only. So if I come out of here again, and I will have to exit SYSPRO for this to take effect. So I'm going to press no, and then just do a Control-C as a quick switch out and in to make it take effect. So the purpose of this, again, just to remind you, is to, when I do a PO receipt, is to send an email with the cost exceed the expected. So I'm going to hit my purchase order program and go into purchase order receipts. And I'm going to go to 601 in this case, and I'm going to overbook again against this line. So simply, I'm just going to book in one, hit post, enter the bin location, and book it into. Oops. Caps lock's on, add to list, save. Okay, so I'm going to continue past these error messages, well, not error messages, warning messages, and press close.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Because the warning messages are inbuilt into SYSPRO as well, but we know as users and human beings, we click past things on screen just to finish off the job. So it's about capturing it and being able to report on it as well.
Exactly that, yeah. And like I said, you could have denied this responsibility before as well, if I had to. So again, how do I now find out that that's fired? Okay, first thing I go to, like my event management, there's an e-signature query. So I'm going to click into there. I should be able to see that my supplier PO receipt 1, which is at 1549, which is my latest one, has fired, and I can see the different before and afters of that event. Okay, so now let's check my emails, and as before, if I come back out here, I can see I've got a new email which happened to come from e-signature, filling in the values. So I can see the cost of the item is 100 in my local currency. It was receipted at 120, which might alert to me as a finance operator that the stock is valued incorrectly, and that I need to change that to make sure my margins are correctly reported. Okay, so the final one around e-signatures I want to focus on, again, is around setting up more detailed logs to capture more information. Now, we all know prices are changing, as we spoke about already, and I want to be able to keep track of that. So one day I can start reporting on trends so I can see how volatile the environment is with my suppliers and whether I need to negotiate them into more fixed pricing contracts. So I'm going to go back into electronic signatures, and I've got a pre-set up one in one about time. So if I go to purchase orders, and I'm going to go to contracts prices, and I can see here I've got one for change contract, supply contracts, set to log only. And I can see also I'm not doing any sort of triggering, I'm just configuring detail to log extra information. So when a contract is changed, I get a history of that change. So I know that's already set up, so I don't need to come out of here. And if I go into my supply contract setup, I can now go into price maintenance, select my contract, and I can now increase my price, or not a minus, that'd be lucky, and go into 650 and hit save. Okay, so now I can query that, and I can now see I've got a new event, 1503, so you know I'm not lying, and I can see the previous price and the current new price. So I'm able to start tracking a history of those changes, which means I can then report on them through other means like an insight tile or any of the reporting mechanisms that you use.
I think what I like about this, Nick, is the fact that we've got some inbuilt amendment journals against master data in various parts of SYSPRO, but this extends it beyond the existing amendment journals as well. And you've got control over exactly what level of detail and when and where you want to control it, especially with the date sensitivity.
Yeah, exactly that. Quite common, we'll see in sales order entry maintenance, so we can see in more detail what things have been changed if the sales order amendments don't go far enough. Or in customer setup, you can start adding these in. So really useful to have a play with and just add on extra logging. Just be wary, it is logging a lot of data, so don't turn it on detail logging for every single transaction in SYSPRO. Otherwise, your database will grow out of control. Okay, So what I want to now move on to the next section.
Yes. All right, we're not going to go all the way back to last year and talk about Suez Canal. We're not going to talk about oil crisis. We know supply challenges are definitely there, but at the end of the day, supply challenges are not. Information has always been king. And with SYSPRO, there are so many different ways that you can bubble it up. There are query programs, there's insight tiles, as Nick's already shown. But what about getting to some of the data that's sitting at the transactional level? What about that back end? And we want to unveil a little bit of how you can get at some of that information, give you a little bit of things that we as consultants will leverage to get at as well. So without further ado, let's see what we can do with that, Nick.
Sounds good to me. So I want to all introduce you to the Business Activity Query Builder, which is hot off the press from SYSPRO and SYSPRO 8. And this is their WYSIWYG designer for designing business queries that can then be surfaced inside insight tiles, potentially application builder programs, and also the new OData platform, which you may one day realize you will need access to, which will allow external systems to query your database without having access to the database layer. So these are going to be hugely powerful in the future for running SYSPRO, and I want to go through the basics of setting one of them up and then rendering it through a insight tile to show you that information. First, before I go into that, I want to just show you how traditionally people might have actually accessed the data. So obviously there's the SQL database, which if you've got a SQL developer or you are a SQL developer, you know how to get access to that. But not all users will have that access level. You might also be in the cloud and you might not be able to get access to it. So you need a front end way to get into it. So a lot of people would have used the data dictionary in the viewer in the past. So again, this is available on the admin screen, and this has actually got more capability than you might realize. So I can go into here and I can start searching for perhaps my inventory movements. From here, I can gain more information about that table. I can also hit view data, and I can now actually get the raw data out and use my export to Excel button to start seeing that data. So this has been available for ages and allows, any user that has the right access levels to the program to get into it and start reporting out data. So that gives you quite a one-dimensional view of the data. If you were to look at that, you'd have to probably, join the stock code table onto it to make it more meaningful. You might have to join the dispatch tables to make it more meaningful. So it's not necessarily built for reporting. So what SYSPRO want to do now is build these business activity queries into building them up so you can get these more joined up views of your data sets. So I'm going to the business activity query program, which again available in the program list. I've just added to my favorites, and this is my entry level to it. So I mentioned before I wanted to build the supplier balances tile that we saw before. So we're going to build that from scratch using very little coding expressions. So first I'm going to give it a name and call it supplier bal, and I'm going to call it supplier balances as a description. And what I want to do now is start adding a data source. So I'm going to set my data source, and this is now drilling into, again, the data dictionary in the background, which gives me information, and I can see all sorts in here. I can see almost anything that's at the SQL object level. So I'm going to look for my supplier master. Okay, that's searching my description, and I can see that the AP supplier is the base table that I'm after. If I click on it, I can see the columns, and that looks pretty clear to me. That is the data I need to generate this tile. So if I double click that now, it adds it to my data source here. And now I need to start looking at getting the right data from that particular table. You can see here, for more advanced users, you'll be able to click on that and add joins onto other tables to bring in even more data that I'm going to show you. I'm going to keep this simple for now. I'm going to go into my columns, and I want to select my AP supplier. Now I want to browse on that. So again, this is to my AP supplier, and I can now start clicking multiple columns that I want to display in this business activity query. So supplier, supplier name, I might need to know what bank, I might need to know the contact details, I might need to, obviously I want to know the current balance, that's the main thing, and also what currency that is in. So I hit accept and close. That now brings it all through. Okay, so I've got a nice simple view and I can do validate SQL. But now first, before I do that, I obviously don't want to bring all the data through like the data dictionary would. I need to give it a filter. So that's on my where clause here. So if I hit that, I can then go into here. I can hit AP supplier, select the column I want it to filter on, which is current balance. The condition, so very similar to conditional formatting that we saw before. And I want to see anything where the current balance is greater than 0. So I'm not using a column, I'm using a little string. So I'm going to go into here and just type in 0. And I can cascade these as many rows as I need. And hit accept and close now. So I've got a filter and I can hit validate SQL, and that should give me a valid SQL statement generated for me. For more advanced users, you can tailor this SQL statement to anything that you want without actually using the builder, and we'll do some more of that in our next session to get even more information from this program. And what I really also like about this is the ability to preview data. So now I can hit that and I can preview the generated data. That again gives me a grid that I'm used to that I can add, I can start looking at and basically pulling out. So if I close that.
I like that, Nick, because that's really useful for someone like me who's not very familiar with SQL. It's just helping me validate as I'm going along whether I've actually got the right information or not.
Exactly, yeah. And if you do get a syntax error, it'll be sure to tell you.
Yeah, not try again, dummy is usually what it says for me.
Yeah. So once I'm happy with my tile, I hit save and publish. So now I've got the option to publish it into multiple companies at the same time. So this business query becomes available to my other companies should that be a valid query for that company to use. So I'm going to click Edu4, which is one of my other companies, and I hit continue. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a very new version of business query, and there is an error I do get here at the minute, but has no downstream effect on my program. Okay, so now it's been published. I can now use it to generate an insight tile from the back of. So I've got a new program which has been available for a few releases of SYSPRO 8 called tile definition. What they've added into here is the ability to build a tile from SYSPRO itself. Those who have been introduced to tiles previously might have done this directly, creating flat files in the SYSPRO directories. So this is now moved into the tile builder program. So when you do a conversion from an old version to a new, they all get imported into this program. So if I hit new tile, I now need to give it a name. So I'm going to call it supplier Bal for now and click OK. So there's various tiles, there's chart type tiles. The more commonly ones are text that we use. I can press OK. So this is nice and simple. It's given me a slight preview of what it's going to look like. It's got the name of the tile. It's got a generic figure here, which is what I want to show as my total balance. So I need to go and sort that out. So with a tile, there's two parts to a tile. There's a summary, which is what you see on the surface here, and there's the detail, and that is when you click on the tile, what information is shown to you. So I'm going to hit edit summary. So again, I can actually put in a custom SQL query. For now, I'm going to keep it simple and do one from the designer itself. So I'm going to do select data source. And again, I'm showing all the tables in SYSPRO. For now, I'm actually going to type in do Control F, which searches a grid, and type in BQ, because that is all my business queries that I've generated. So you can see my supplier balance one is available here, and this is what I added in before. If I double click that, now I need to select a column. I'm actually going to get rid of my where statement because it's not going to be filtered on anything. I'm going to select my column. That has to be the current balance. So currently, it's set in the current balance is what's going to be displayed on the front, and I just know that I need to sum that up. There's a small bit of syntax that you need to know. and I want to also make sure that is only displayed to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to just change that to 2 decimal places. Hit validates equal, it's happy, I can close that.
You're
So
just
that's my
making it
summary.
look pretty with that script and summing it up, so that's perfect. I like it.
Exactly, yeah, and you'll see how that might generate it differently in a sec. Now, finally, I need to edit the detail, which is when I click onto it. And quite simply, it's already pulled through the query from my summary. So all I now need to do is assign columns, and I can just do a multiple click on that. And I can even do, I think I can do a shift to shift them all as well, and accept and close. So now it's generated that. I can validate this equal, and I can validate it's equal and close.
So what you did on the first is show what's showing right on the screen on the tile before you drill into it. And then on the tile detail is what happens when you click and it opens up another pane to show you the details, proving the number that you're seeing on the front tile.
Exactly that, yeah.
Perfect.
So last thing I now need to do is add it to tile. Obviously, this is the one I had before, so I'm going to add my new one, which was called supplier bal. I go to edit web view, and I've designed this web view for the SYSPRO client. So again, tiles are available in Avanti and the SYSPRO client. I'll go into my designer, and just a quick note on this: the performance in Avanti for this design is a lot better than the client, but SYSPRO are actively working on the performance of this program to make it a bit quicker to use. So I'm going to go into add tile. I'm going to my custom tile category, which is where I added it to. If I just wait a few seconds for that to generate, and then I can click supplier bal, which is what I added. So tile background color, let's give it a mint green and a white text. I can make it large. I can do add tile. And once I'm happy with that, obviously I can delete this tile if I wanted to. I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'm going to hit save. So obviously this screen now needs to refresh. I can hit the refresh button to do that. Okay, I got this before.
It doesn't like you today. It wouldn't be a demo without
No, it
screens.
wouldn't be. Yeah, I did when I tested this before. I got the same error, so I need to just work out why. It seems like to come out of SYSPRO and back in for it to get it to load. Just the curse of the demo.
I do like the tiles because
Okay.
what they do is they give us, I think you're gonna have to close this, Nick, for me.
Yeah, I'm going to come all the way out rather than do Control C.
So the tiles for me are very much about the one-stop shop. They give me the information in my lazy way of seeing the news headline, but it's about being able to drill in as and where I want to. And I know a lot of people on this call have already been using tiles quite significantly. What I like about this particular iteration, the latest release of SYSPRO 8, is the fact that it gives me the ability to build that query out. All right, you've got your supply bal and supplier with balance stuttering a
Yeah,
bit.
so there you go. So that's my latest tile that I can now click into and see the information. And as before, I can use my hyperlinks. I've still got my invoice button available to drill into the invoices that I added before with my internal status. So using the business activity query builder, I'm able to generate a whole tile and render it up, show me the information I need. Give or take an error or two. And I believe that concludes it for my main demos today.
All right, that's great. So just before we do that really quickly, I'm going to have a quick poll that I wanted to launch. You're going to see that pop up on your screen. It's pretty typical from a GoToWebinar. Have you seen something today that you can use directly within your business? Yes, no, not quite sure as yet. If you wouldn't mind just pulling that in. It's just collecting the responses now. We've got about 67% that have voted. All right, excellent. I'm going to close that. So I do like being here in the UK because when you have a question like yes, no, not yet, sure, almost no one votes no so far. So that's reassuring for you, Nick. You've shown things that hopefully people will find useful. In fact, 90% have actually seen something that they would pull in. For the 10% that are not yet sure, let's talk about some of the tools that were used. We looked at form actions, which means that you can click on from within a program itself, launching another program and actively engage with it right away. The customized hyperlinks for me are really nice because you're in a particular program with the list view, you're showing lots and lots of detail, but you want to go from there to drill out and see some more detail specifically about that one line. And it's about using the custom hyperlinks to go into that program really quickly and tailoring where you want to end up rather than having to jump back into a query screen to then drive into it. Custom form fields are a staple within SYSPRO itself. It's about saying, I actually want to add more information and capture more information than SYSPRO out of the box allows me to. The conditional formatting that we have within list views itself, and the ability to bubble up and highlight certain things. As we know, eyes get drawn to colors and things that are different from the others. It's about driving behavior based on conditional formatting. Toolbar customization, again, quick, easy, single click, navigate from where I am to where I want to be. The event management, electronic signatures are all around something's happened. I need someone to know about it. I need someone to do something about it. And then all about the access to data. So old school way, as I'd like to call it, the data dictionary to be able to surface that up. And one of the things that I do worry about, Nick, is with that data dictionary, that's a lot of rich information. Is there a way for me to secure that?
As always, with any program, you can get the program name and make sure the users cannot have access to it by a role or group.
Perfect. So just secure DDS BFI from a data dictionary and away we go.
Exactly. If you want to call it technically said like that, Dorothy.
Yeah, that's it. I'm bringing my geekiness out today. And then, of course, we had the lovely brand new business activity query. I love it. All right, good stuff. So that's what we covered today. Where to next? We covered a lot of functionality today that comes out in SYSPRO 8. So there are previous webinars we have specifically in and around SYSPRO 8 and what's new. Take a look if you want to learn more about what's there. Coming up next week, Nick talked a little bit about some of the things you can do in and around supplier invoices, and we have a partner, Nota, that actually allows you to automatically capture invoices, read what's on there. So if you scan them in, you've got them emailing in and automating the invoice matching without some of the aggro, as they call it. So we've got that webinar coming up. And then, of course, Nick just touched the surface on things that someone like me can do, someone without some deep technical skills or development skills, but he's going to go into some more of the low code techniques that you can use within SYSPRO itself. I referred earlier to the fact that there's system administrator training that goes into things like electronic signatures, tool customizations, hyperlinks. We just took some samples of those and elaborated on where you might want to think about using that within the business. As always, SYSPRO's got rich collateral available. There is the go-to portal on the microsite. You've got F1, launch SYSPRO, hit on F1, see what help you can get with that. And of course, our help desk is always, always, always available. So that's our webinar for today. Nick, if I could just get you to flip over, I think that's all we wanted to cover today. Is that right? It is. I just wanted to say thank you very much. Before I do close off though, I see that we have a few questions already open, and if you've got questions, we're around for a while as well, so please add them into the Q&A box. The first question that I got, oh, I like this question. It goes back to when you showed the list view builder at the beginning for us, Nick. The question is it possible to build an AP and AR trial balance in a similar manner to the order and booking report? Because the trial balance is exported to Excel. They're not really user-friendly, and I agree, they really aren't. So the short answer to that is yes, of course, it's possible. The list views aren't available out of the box. It's not something that's available like the order and booking list view. But fundamentally, if you go back into that custom pane for me, please, what happens is as we look at that order and booking list view, it's based on the business object that the report, the order and booking report, is reporting on as well. So what we would do is, from a technical perspective, probably look at the same thing from an AP/AR perspective. Yeah, thanks, Nick. You know exactly where I'm getting you to head. If you go into the properties of that, we'll take a look at the fact that it's, and this is really jumping into a little bit more of what Nick's going to be covering as part of the customization technique. So if you drive into the VB script for me, in there, what it's doing is just calling in the background the same report underlying session to be able to pull that out. And you'd want to do something similar on the AP and the AR trial balance as well. Now that's a lot of code. That gets a little bit scary for someone like me, but it is something that is possible. So hopefully that answers that question. We've got another question here. Oh, where is the business activity query builder located?
Okay, so I think this come out in R2, Darshini.
It did. The latest release of SYSPRO that's currently available, which is 2021 R2.
So first of all, you'll need to make sure you're on R2 to see this. And it is, like any person, I never remember. So I press Control F here and I look for part of the learn and then find it in my general administration, general setup, business activity query builder. I did notice I had a hotfix installed, which I will install for this demo. They are adding it also to the ribbon bar as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Good stuff. Yeah, the last question is, of course, is there a recording of the session? Yes, absolutely. Kelly on our marketing team will make sure that that gets circulated to all of you today as well. Wonderful. Those are all the questions I see so far. And I think at that point, what I'll do is close off, but of course you've got our contact details. And so just email back onto the invitation email if you've got anything we haven't already covered. If there's anything else you want to see in future webinars, don't be shy. We'd love to be able to hear from you. Lovely. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you all.